So we are live. Thank you for joining us. So today, one moment. Today we are going to be discussing tourism versus the environment. We will be discussing this topic from three main different perspectives: a tourism-friendly perspective, an environmentally conscious perspective, and historical/archaeological based perspective. Are tourism and the environment two opposing sectors, or can balance be achieved? I am Neil Zara on behalf of KSU, and I will be moderating this discussion. And our panelists today are Professor Gambin, who is a senior lecturer in maritime archaeology at the University of Malta and has been involved in numerous collaborative research projects. Currently, he is working on the exploration and study of the archaic Phoenician shipwreck discovered off of Gozo. Dr. Quintana, who is a lecturer and management consultant specializing in tourism, aviation, and the hospitality sectors. He was the director of MTA and its acting chairman for many years. In July last year, Dr. Quintana was appointed to the board of directors of Medavia Aviation. Sarah Bultil is a third-year university student, environmentalist, currently reading for a degree in economics and public policy. And Stephen Bayada, who is a medical student, environmentalist, and founding member of the EU Youth for Ocean Forum. So, my first question is, how do you think the tourism industry has impacted the environment in Malta over the past 10 years? The floor is yours.
Yes, I'll kick off. I think that first of all, yes, 10 years. Of course, in the last 10 years, undoubtedly, we have seen an unprecedented growth in tourist numbers to Malta. And not only to Malta, this has been a global phenomenon, to be honest, that tourist numbers have increased dramatically. We also saw some milestone changes, such as, for example, the main source market changing, the number one outgoing source market in the world has changed from European-based to China-based. Now the Chinese are the number one travelers, or were the number one travelers. The thing is, 10 years is a little bit restrictive. If you will allow me, I will go back just a few more years to 2006 to be more precise, because 2006 this unprecedented growth in tourism numbers in Malta goes back primarily to a policy decision taken in 2006 and enshrined in the tourism policy for the Maltese Islands 2007, 2011. And this tourism policy specifically encouraged the growth of low-cost carriers to Malta. And I'm very careful always here by the choice of words, because some people say opened up for low-cost carriers to Malta. This is mistaken, because actually there was no stopping them. We were European Union members, and they could have come and gone whenever they liked. The thing is that we consciously incentivize low-cost carriers to come to Malta. As the policy itself stated at the time, there was a major disruptive wave within Europe in terms of low-cost carriers, and we had to. It said the policy stated that we had to jump on this bandwagon. The thing is that I believe that restricting it to just the environment again is narrow. Nowadays, of course, we talk more of an ecosystem, of a complete ecosystem. Also, I know that it's sometimes it's jargon and buzzwords such as sustainable development and sustainable tourism. I don't even like the term sustainable tourism. I prefer to call it responsible tourism. But therefore, there are further implications in terms of the environment. Yes, for sure. But also the economic impact, and my goodness, do we know it now? Because the 2010-20 has been a whitewash, and we know that the impact where 1/3 of the economy has practically come to a full stop, and the impact that this has had on the economy. The social impact, of course, as well. If one thing is that there's the tourism in its downside has severe social impact on host communities in particular. And last but not least, even the fourth pillar of sustainable development nowadays, which is recognized to be the cultural impact as well. think it's a good introduction.
Thank you, Dr. Quintana. Would anyone else like to add on to the question? Should I repeat the question for the sake of whoever is joining now? So the question is, how do you think the tourism industry has impacted the environment in Malta over the past 10 years? Again, the floor is yours. Thank you, Dr. Quintana.
If you will allow me, I will share. Sorry, I will share a slide. Does it work or?
I don't know. I'm not.
No. All right. Okay. Never mind. All right.
Thank you.
I come to your next question. Okay.
Hi. Well, I'd like to say that basically tourism has helped Malta a lot. Like, as we all know, that Malta depends highly on tourism, as we can have seen, as Dr. Quintana mentioned, due to the COVID-19, like it has affected Malta quite a bit. It has affected Malta negatively and positively. For example, for the economy, it has brought about lots of money, lots of opportunities for people. However, I would like to mention that because of the negative effects, I'd say overdevelopment is one of them, over construction of hotels. I'd also like to mention Comino, for example, and the development of Comino, large number of tourists visiting Comino. Also uncontrolled touristic activity on Comino, leading to a serious impact on the island's biodiversity, which is causing tremendous pressure on the surroundings, as well as the recent hotel proposal for Comino. I'd also like to mention the hotel proposal in Kalanka, which could also lead to a loss of biodiversity there. Basically, it has advantages and disadvantages. However, I'd say at this point, like, tourism needs to be sustainable. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And that's all.
Thank you. Yes, Steve?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I think it's really good that KSU host these debates and organize these debates. They're important for society. I think it's important to discuss it on a sector by sector basis. So when we talk about tourism, if we had to take the diving industry, that is, I think, one of the best examples of where environmental protection can help tourism, and tourism can then finance environmental protection. And that is an example of an activity where it generates employment. It's fun, people like diving, and you can also generate income, which you can then funnel into marine protected areas, the protection of archaeology, the protection of architecture, and the protection of heritage. However, if you have to look at over-tourism, as Sarah rightly pointed out, the impact on natural resources is going to be big and is going to be intense. Malta has very little water left. We depend mostly on reverse osmosis. So the sheer volume of tourists, that has an impact. And if we have to look at Comino, if you have too many people on Comino itself, you get footpath erosion because people walk onto the garrigue and trample on the garrigue. So that affects the biodiversity negatively. You need to supply those tourists so you can have some waste with packaging, food, etc. And the environmental impact can be large, especially if it is mismanaged.
Thank you, Steve. Professor Gambin, would you like to add any comments before I move on to another question connected to what was just said?
Okay, so it's not so much of a comment, but in order to have a more informed discussion, I would like to hear from the two young persons on the panel what they understand as sustainable tourism, because Dr. Quintana said that he doesn't like, here we are discussing or supporting with many of the questions being guided by the term sustainable tourism. And on the other hand, the tourism expert saying he doesn't like the term, he likes to use the term responsible tourism. I would like a bit of clarification from the environmental participants on the panel as to what they believe sustainable tourism is, or a broad definition.
Okay, so basically by sustainable tourism, when I think about it, I think about tourism and what environmental impact it has. For example, when I catch a flight, what does the flight entail? Like the emissions. When I go to a hotel, am I choosing an eco-friendly hotel? For example, in Malta, some hotels have the eco certification. Um, and besides that, do I know what the hotel entails? For example, is it using reused water, like grey water for grey fresh water? For example, these are minor things that people don't really think about, like the detergents and when it changes its laundry. And basically, what I think when I think about it, it's like does does this like vacation abroad have an environmental impact? Am I Can I do something that will reduce this environmental impact? And basically what it is, it's being aware of the choices you make. For example, if I go abroad, I check, there's a website called Eco BNB for the Airbnb. And I check this website and I choose something that is more environmentally friendly. Basically, that's it.
Okay, super clear. Steve, if you can give me.
Sure. From my perspective, I mean, the textbook definition of sustainability is development that protects the environment, the economy, and the social aspect. And for me, that's how I interpret. That's the lens through which I view sustainable tourism. It is a very important sector for Malta and for the Mediterranean. There is a social impact with the sheer volume of people. And of course, you have an environmental impact because you have to balance what resources are we using, can we use them more effectively, how can we shift the sector to help as opposed to hinder the environment?
Okay. That makes it extremely clear. One thing that I'd just like to pick up on what you commented on, Steve, we need to be careful. Yes, it's true. And I agree with you completely that we can look at it sector by sector. But if we take diving, and you said diving is fun, but fun is subjective. You know, it may be fun for a segment of the tourism market, but a hotel party, and in no way am I saying that I agree with that avenue either, but a hotel party is clearly fun for another segment. Now, whether Malta chooses one path or another, so it's just to be a bit careful that we don't what we think or what we think is fun or is good, and project that sort of in a global, not global, but the word I'm looking for is we cannot generalize. Okay, so be careful about generalizations. That's all. It's not a criticism. It's just an observation. Obviously, I'm all for the diving market. I think it's a section that we should build and so on. But just to be a bit careful. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, and thank you. I understand your point.
Thank you, Professor Gambi. Moving on to my next question. It's connected to what Sarah mentioned when she explained what she considers to be sustainable tourism. What are the strategies that the industry is implementing with regards to water, waste, and energy overall? So what are hotels and restaurants mainly doing in order to decrease water wastage and energy waste? The floor is yours.
I mean, let me start off with this because it's obviously really outside my my kind of area of, I wouldn't even dare to say expertise, but my area of knowledge. I cannot really say what they're doing. I know for a fact because my wife lectures in the Institute of Earth Systems, and some of the site visits include visits to entities, both private and public, and also things like embassies, which sort of have these implement these initiatives. So I know through her work that there are hotels, and even big hotels, that have massive environmental policies in place, and they do put them into practice. Is it enough? I personally don't think so. I think there could be a lot more done. Steve rightly mentioned our dependence on reverse osmosis. there's no magic wand solution. However, there are technologies, and I'm sure technologies that are becoming more and more efficient, whereby, I don't know, the reutilization of grey waters, etc., should be implemented on a larger scale. And just to conclude, my main observation would be, or my concluding comment is that, and you'll hear me say this throughout the discussion, government should reward such initiatives. Because in the long term, if you are not using water from the reverse osmosis, you are lessening wear and tear on the river. So you are actually doing a favor to government infrastructure. You're lessening the impact or lessening the pressure on the water distribution center, for example. So these, plus the environmental benefits, okay, that, I don't know, if you're reducing use of water from, there's a big percentage of our electricity that is used by the reverse osmosis plants. So if we reduce that dependence on RO, we're also reducing the amount of energy that goes into that. So I think government should have a policy where they reward these initiatives.
If I may, thank you, Prof. Gambin. The thing is that since I used to be an academic with a pragmatic practitioner side. Now I'm the other way around. I'm more of a practitioner with an academic sideline. I think that these let's call them circular economy measures. They are yes in operation in Maltese hotels, the Maltese hospitality industry. The thing is, now let's be honest with each other, and I can assure you that they do this primarily not because they're environmentally conscious, but because they are cost conscious. Because many of these measures help reduce cost. Basically, again, the reverse osmosis RO has been mentioned. I have one in my house. It's the best investment I ever did in my house. And the thing is that, of course, that applies to hotels on the coastline. Primarily, the hotels that are not on the coastline, then they have a problem there. How to access water, energy and solar panels, etc., etc. A major component of the tourism industry, of which I am a pet hater, and I've been quoted about this. Actually, is the cruise industry, which is some considered part of the tourism industry. To me, people who come into Malta at 10 in the morning and leave at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, they're not tourists. They don't even fall within the legal definition of a tourist to Malta. And the pollution caused by the cruise industry is phenomenal. The government is launching a scheme whereby cruise liners can plug in to our system. A mega cruise liner like the ones that we've been seeing lately will take up more energy than a medium-sized town in Malta like Asha, Pudi, or Zaytun. So I very much hope that they'll be paying for this. But that is a good initiative. Now touching on these issues, again, I think, as I mentioned, most of these initiatives are cost-driven rather than environmentally driven. And so there's a lot of it. What the market dictates at the end of the day. I think it is extremely important to note that this is a supply-based question. Now, being an economist as well, I always believe that it's demand and supply, not supply and demand. That demand and supply are separation. First, you analyze the demand, and then you analyze the supply side. So at the end of the day, we should be asking ourselves, what does the consumer want? What does the potential tourist want of us? And what do our potential supplier of tourism, such as tour operators, want? I might just as well come to an event, one of the pivotal events in my life, I think, when many years ago, mind you, quite some 20 years ago, I accompanied the then Minister for Tourism for Malta, which eventually made it to Brussels, etc., etc. One of the main issues in Malta then and still now is that by far the biggest tour operator in the world, which is Germany's TUI, well, actually they control all tour operating activities in Europe, not just India. Those of my generation remember people like Thomson Holidays. They are nowadays all part of TUI Germany. we had prepared the presentation to attract TUI to come to Malta, the biggest tour operator in Germany and in the world. And had prepared the presentation. The minister asked me to do a cost-benefit analysis, the price incentive, etc., etc. We arrived at the head office in Hanover. I remember a huge building, just like the Pentagon. Anyway, and I was going to do my presentation, whereas when their vice president told me, no, in our house, I do the presentation, not you. Thank you very much, typical German. Anyway, so, and then for an hour and a half, we were lectured about Malta. And not for 1 second did they mention the price or whatever, or incentives, or giving them a kickback, or whatever it is. It was all about environment. That was all. They told us Malta does. They were so typically skeptic German that they just told us, no, Malta does not feature in our plans because of the environment. Now, major tour operators such as TUI, basically, they only contract with hotels that are that have the European Union's green label, green certification. Now, I think one of you mentioned quite nicely so that hotels in Malta Eco certified. Please let's be careful. They do have some kind of Eco certification. I could get you one for about 500 euros. The true Eco certification, which is the European Union's green flag, only one hotel in Malta has it, and that is, I mentioned by name because they deserve it, that is Hilton Malta. So technically, you get a major operator such as TUI, who could only work with Hilton Malta because they're the only ones who are EU Eco certified. There are other criteria, and perhaps here Professor Gambin can come in, is that they require, it's a must, that any hotel located by the sea has to be a blue flag green beach. Now there, I think we've made some progress in it, and I'll stop there for the time being because once I start, there's no touching.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment? Then I can move on based off of what Dr. Quintana mentioned in relation to eco hotels. To what extent do you believe that eco hotels are succeeding in positively influencing the environment?
Again, sorry. Again, because here it's a nice question, it's a good question, and let's talk about the supply side. Again, there has been a market upheaval in the last 10, 15 years completely. So, in fact, if we look at Malta, there have been two major developments going back 10, 15 years. The industry is basically divided into two. From studies which I have conducted myself, there are two. That's why, in a way, it's a simple industry because there are two main supply components. These are transport, getting to your destination, getting from A to B, and sleeping somewhere. You need somewhere where to sleep. Those are, but between those two, transport and accommodation, that's 90% of your tourism package. Okay, actually in equal parts, 45%, 45%. Now, this question deals with the accommodation side. The revolution there has also been quite pronounced in Malta because in recent years we've seen this shift from what is known as collective accommodation, sharing economy. Airbnb already mentioned by Sarah, and this has been very pronounced. Officially, now 40% of our accommodation is in Airbnb style of accommodation. I think that unofficially it's far more. I could give you plenty of examples of that. So therefore, we should, yes, of course, be asking ourselves what are hotels doing about eco-friendly measures, etc., etc. But on the other hand, because this is interesting because one of the points frequently raised by for example, the Motor Hotels and Restaurants Association, and here one could have, for example, invited a speaker from the MHRA, from the Hotels Association, is that quite, and I think they mean it, is look, we're not against Airbnb. It's a disruptor, it's a global phenomenon, we can't stop it. But at least let's play on level ground. All the environmental restrictions, all the health and safety restrictions which apply to hotels, do they apply to the Airbnbs in Budia, Tarshin, Zaytun, etc., etc.?
Thank you. Steve? I'm seeing you think. And then would you like to comment?
No, I'm just processing what that's being said, to be honest. Very informative, so no comment from my end.
Thank you.
I think at this stage it's also important to point out, okay, that Malta is actually a very particular case, and this is important to keep this in mind with regard to our competitors in the Med. What do I mean? That somewhere like the Balearic Islands, for example, has the hinterland of Spain where it can send its inhabitants to university, if it needs to send its garbage, etc., etc. The same with the Greek islands, same with the Italian islands. If you go off the Egadi or the Aeolian Islands, every day you have a boat with fresh water that fills the tanks, they distribute, etc. In Malta, given that we're an island nation, so we're the same size as Menorca, more or less, or a small Greek island, but yet, besides tourism, we have all the pressure of if we need 3 recycling plants, we have to have them. We can't stick them overseas. If we need to send our garbage to a landfill, the garbage landfill has to be on our island. If the university needs to expand, it needs to expand here. So there's that which makes us very, very particular and different to most, if not all, our competitors. We can't come up with a scheme and say, okay, we're going to give this stretch of coast, as they did in Tunisia, specifically for tourism. You know, the second thing is that a lot of recent development, and I would call it also positive development, like the regeneration of palazzos in Valletta into boutique hotels. You can fit a boutique hotel or a very stylish hotel into a palazzo, but then it's very hard to, it's not impossible, but there are some green credentials which can be achieved. But you can't stick, I don't know, a gazillion pannelli on the roofs of Valletta, because that, you know, Valletta's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, etc. So there are other aspects. We do want the regeneration of Valletta, and yet certain green credentials are nearly impossible to reach. Does it mean that we don't ask for others? Of course not, but just to keep this in the conversation.
Thank you. So,
Neil, allow me that, of course, that let's turn this into a discussion really into it, because I mentioned we spoke about first of all, there's a word which starts with a G, which I'm trying to remember just now, but slips my tongue. And when help Professor Gambi, you know, because you mentioned boutique hotels in Valletta.
Gentrification.
Pardon?
Gentrification.
Gentrification. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks. Gentrification. Yeah, that's the negative social aspect of it. Gentrification. When the residents are pushed out of the equation. I have with me here on my desk one of my favorite books, which I really recommend. This tiny little paperback, upside down, which is now in English as well. But I read the original 5 times in Italian. Se Venezia Amore by Salvatore Setti. This is shocking. This book, basically, even I, as a tourism person, was shocked with the impact of tourism on Venezia, and in particular the gentrification issue. Se Venezia Amore. It's an amazing book. It's small paper. We can't ignore a part. So as I mentioned, I said that 45% of the package is accommodation. I'm going to speak 45% is transport. Now, in the case of Malta, of course, we know that 98% of all our arrivals come by air. So we depend a lot on air transport. Now we know it again. Now my aviation background, but I have to say this that unfortunately. Of all means of transport, believe it or not, air transport is one of the most polluting modes of transport. Despite all the efforts being done by the aviation industry to mitigate pollution, still the rate of growth of air transport or passenger is actually cancelling out all the mitigation measures being taken by the industry. I gathered a couple of figures for this debate actually. Since I took 2006 to be the departure date, the departure point basically when in 2006 we had 27,800 aircraft movements in Malta. In 2019 we had 52,000, almost double the aircraft movements in Malta. Now again, let's give credit to the aviation industry because they are doing their best to mitigate pollution, including Air Malta. Even this week with Little Thunder, the fourth Air Malta Airbus and NEO new engine option arrived. These are super fuel efficient and environmental friendly aircraft. Another figure which I picked up, and I can't leave you without it, is that I took the same period, basically 2006 and 2019, and introduced these cruise liners, which you realize by now are my pet hate. In 2006, we had 356 cruise liners with 390,000 cruise passengers. Last year, we had 359, just 3 ships more than 2006, but more than twice the arrivals. Obviously, because ships have become mega ships. Now they're twice the size of what they were just 10 years ago, basically. And of course, they use heavy fuel oil. So we made all that much fuss about our power station, which use heavy fuel oil. And each and every cruise liner which comes into Malta is the equivalent of a power station and more in terms of pollution.
So
Yes.
yeah, just let's be careful when because this is a classic symptom of sort of part of Maltese mentality, and I have to put it out there. For decades, we complained about Valletta being a dead city and the need to revive Valletta and the need to give Valletta nightlife, etc. Now that it's happened over the past 10 years, now the complaint has flipped, and there's this notion of gentrification, when in reality, people were leaving Valletta already because of housing conditions. They weren't priced out in the past 10 years. People have been, and you can notice this, drive around when Valletta win the Football League, drive around San Juan, Nashar, etc., and you'll see Valletta Football Club flags everywhere, the spread of it. And even those people entered Valletta after Valletta was emptied in World War II. So let's be a bit careful about the use of this notion of gentrification of Valletta.
Thank you, Professor Gambin. I'd like to go back to a point mentioned by Professor Gambin as well about the reality of an island nation in the Mediterranean. Given our small size, does the duty of preserving our national, cultural, and environmental heritage to the next generation clash with ensuring that Malta remains an attractive tourist destination in the coming years?
I'll start on this, and I'm sorry to grab the microphone. Clash? Absolutely not. They are bound inseparably, because first of all, we are legally bound to protect our cultural heritage. It's actually quite a bold statement. The Cultural Heritage Act of 2003 opens with a line, with a sentence on the line of that each individual member, whether a citizen or a visitor, is legally bound to protect the cultural heritage. So even a tourist is legally bound. Now, how that gets implemented and enforced is obviously a different story. But the important thing is that the concept is there enshrined in law. Now, if we don't preserve the cultural heritage, and this is something that coincidentally I'm working on recently, because it's something I believe in strongly. So if you take the Malta the Developers Association, they can call upon a string of reports which calculate and quantify the value of the construction industry in Malta. How many employees, what contribution to the GDP, how much tax, how much VAT, etc. The hotels can do it as well. The MHRA may conduct a report. Dr. Quintano has been referring to reports that he's worked on. With cultural heritage, funnily enough, this has never been done. Okay, nobody has commissioned the report to say, look, X amount of people enter St. John's. 500,000 actually is the amount. They pay X amount of euros per person, so that is quantifiable. Heritage Malta sites, Fondazione Withoutna, Din Light Helwa, etc., etc. Then you have the hotel nights. How many people come specifically for cultural heritage? So that's also a direct contribution. Then you have the intrinsic part, the hidden part, okay? And I'm going to mention two aspects. You've come to Malta, perhaps not specifically for cultural heritage, but you'll sit on a bench in Tashbish and admire the city of Valletta across the sea. That may increase your level of experience, okay? So that is an intrinsic cultural heritage impacting tourism in an intrinsic way. And another intrinsic way is, for example, our traditional boats. And Dr. Quintano, I'm sure with his experience in MTA, can confirm innumerous postcards for the young people. Postcards were things that you write on the back of and send. I think they're making some kind of a comeback, but I say that in jest, obviously. So postcards with traditional boats, posters of MTA. So there is that hidden value related to marketing, related to our identity as well, the identity of the Maltese market, because those boats are absolutely unique. And this has never been quantified, okay? And quantified, yes, crassly and in a vulgar manner in pounds, shillings, and pence, because I too am a practical person, and I know that if you go with words to an authority, they'll say, yes, very nice, thank you very much. But if you go with actual figures of employment numbers, the contribution to the economy and so on, then they'll sit up and listen. I don't know whether I answered the question, but to be honest, this was too important not to say. But I think that what your question about caring for the cultural environment, the natural environment, and the future of tourism, I think they are bound, intrinsically bound. Okay.
Again, I think that, for example, you hit it on the head, and I can assure you that similar studies have been done abroad. I can recall studies in England, for example, in the United Kingdom, where the value of cultural activity and the cultural sectors have been done.
They actually they put a value in pound, shilling, and pence on Stonehenge.
Yes. That's right. Somewhere in my data storage, I have these reports. Anyway, the thing is also, continuing on your line, you really hit it on the head, is that another disruptor, a major disruptor in recent years, which we seem to have totally ignored, apart from the sharing economy, and the lack of ownership. You young people don't own. My generation, we're stuck to ownership. The other major disruptor has been the search for authenticity, which this, when you speak about authenticity, it has been a little bit of a vague term, an intangible. What on earth is authenticity? What is authentic? There is this subconscious and sometimes conscious search for authenticity, which is driving holidaymakers, and we fail to understand this. And I think this is going to be not coronavirus, but this is going to be the doom of our tourism industry, because we are not recognizing the fact that people living in concrete jungles in Frankfurt or Düsseldorf or wherever, they will not seek to go to a place which is also a replica of a concrete jungle. They seek what is local, what is authentic, basically, what makes us authentic. And we do have, we just mentioned a couple, the Maltese guys are not only, the landscape which is fast disappearing, etc. So many things. The character of the Maltese, the Maltese village. Why are I was once shocked about 10 years ago, not so long ago, by the German ambassador actually asking my tourism students at the time, why don't tourists go to Asha, Gudia, and the Papa? They said, are you crazy or something? Do you expect tourists to go to Abba, Gudia, and Dasha over there? Of course they do. They are in search for authenticity, which is one of the main drivers of Airbnb. Okay? It's not just a question of cost, far from it. Also, another horrible word which has been used in Malta in the last couple of years or more is this word cosmopolitan. We want to turn Malta cosmopolitan. What the hell do you want to turn Malta cosmopolitan for? If we had no character, if we had no authenticity, if we had no local, then yes, let's throw ourselves into another Dubai or this Dubai. But we have so much things to protect, authenticity to protect, because that is the distinguishing feature. That is what gives us our comparative advantage instead of our competitive advantage.
But surprisingly, this is where I differ slightly from you. And I can't, and just give me a second, Steve, because, and we have a big advantage locally. Malta can never be like a typical Greek island or like a typical Italian island, mainly for the reasons that I mentioned before, that we're an independent nation state with all the pressures and all the concrete. We need a massive Mater Dei, as we found out. We need a massive university if we want to cater for 12,000 students. The second reason why we can't is our history. When the Knights arrived here in 1530, there were 20,000 inhabitants, and the guy writing the report was already complaining that we were overpopulated. Aksepwara with 500,000, because of the constant history that we have. We are, by our very nature, a cosmopolitan island. Malta, Aragozo, and we can offer the best of both worlds. If you want slightly cosmopolitan and then go for the quiet village life, you can visit for a why don't we market Attad, Lian, and Balsan, for example, those beautiful village cores. You can have that, and yet you can have Valletta with theatre and so on. But and then Gozo is a gem, because Gozo is still to this day quasi a traditional Mediterranean island, like you find in Greece and of Spain. It my fissirx, hawnhekk ħajkolli ngħidha bil-Malti, ma jfissirx li nżommuha bħala presepju, because obviously the Gozans have their own need and so on, and many would argue against what we're saying here. You know, let's say it as it is. Many Gozans, including those in the tourism industry, want, for example, let's introduce the elephant in the room. They want the bridge.
They don't.
Many Gozans want the bridge. Many don't.
The connection.
And many don't. Or whatever. Bridge, sorry, tunnel, the connection. Many do.
The Gozo Tourism Association, they're against the tunnel.
Many do, and many don't. I'm personally against the connection, because obviously it's going to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. And I'm not saying this selfishly to keep it in a book, because I really see that the future of tourism in Gozo is a sustainable, a green form of tourism, different to what we offer in Malta. But there are many on the other side of the Fliegu who are in favor of it. So anyway, I digress. Sorry, Steve, I took some of your time.
I think if I am to come in, the comment at the very beginning that Neil Zara made, perhaps one of the biggest issues is that if we have to look at our authenticity, our identity, for me, one of the most important features is that when I look at the skyline, it's dominated by churches. Some areas of Malta, that is not the case anymore. It's still very much prevalent in Gozo. And that's something which I'm going to speak personally. So there's that bias. But I have family, friends across Europe. When they come to Malta, that is what attracts them, that authenticity, that idea that you're in the Mediterranean and it's beautiful and it's nice and they're amazed by it. And I have friends who specialize in archaeology. They're amazed when they hear that we have a civilization that is 6,000 to 7,000 years old, that we have temples, and that's what draws them. And okay, that's a very particular market, yes. But if we had to look forward into what do we want our tourism industry to develop, they are people who love the island for its authenticity and for what it is, and for what it could develop into. but we have to be really careful how we continue to develop. And that's the point I want to put across, because some areas are much nicer than they were, but some areas you cannot say that statement anymore.
Thank you, Steve. Moving on to, I think, one of the last questions. What can be done to safeguard further our natural resources vis-a-vis tourism in general, and our natural resources on one side and including our heritage at the side?
The only natural resource we have is stone. There's no other, there's no other natural resource per se. I mean, I don't know. Okay, maybe one of the environmentalists on the panel can enlighten me. But as a resource per se, we don't have oil, gas, etc. So the real only natural resource has ever been stone. Now, if we want to broaden that and say, look, I don't know, the sea is a natural resource, then we can bring that into the discussion as well. So I'll leave the floor to them to see whether they want to broaden out and include that.
No, I think as an extension to what Professor Gambino is saying, what he defines as stone, I define it as land. I think that the two major bottlenecks in Malta have been our land and human resources. Now again, human resources, of course, as Professor Gambino has just pointed out, in terms of numbers, we beat everybody. Half a million people plus 2.3 million tourists per year on 345 square kilometers is a high intensity. But of course, I'm talking more about quality of human resources and in terms of education in particular and segmentation, etc. Because I think when it comes to human resources, specialist human resources, I mean, again, at the moment I'm more focused on the aviation sector. I'm sorry, it's the aviation sector. I mentioned that tourism is basically made up of transport in our case and hospitality. And there are no local human resources. Go wherever you like, and it is foreign human resources. Even in terms of aviation, we have maintenance organizations, we call them MROs, but they're all dependent now on foreign labor. Aren't we trying to? Yes, we're trying, but we do not recognize our needs early enough to prepare, because it takes 5-6 years to educate, to prepare an engineer, an aviation engineer. So at the moment we're bringing in from India, from Pakistan, wherever. But the other main, of course, resource is land. And here I'm grateful for Professor Gambino for bringing this up, because we have to be so careful about land use, and we are, I think, throwing it away, land use. The more we should be careful with the way that we use land, not just for tourism purposes, but for others. Do we need more hotels when people are actually moving away from hotels? Do we need to now with the excuse of tourism, because this is what me being a tourism person, with the excuse of tourism taking up more precious land? I mean, I'm old enough to remember how many hotels, ex-hotels, are now apartments, flats, and residences. With the excuse, they always, every single time there is an application with MEMA for an ex-hotel site, they tell you, but we will rebuild the hotel in this moment. Never. It's never happened. And write it down. Now I live here in Massachusetts. I moved here from St. Julius. People think I'm crazy, but it's the best move we ever made. And I live here overlooking, my terrace overlooks what used to be the German Hotel. Yeah. Okay, that was built on unscored land there to employ Maltese people at the time, to employ 400, 500 people. What are the plans now? To build 170 luxury apartments in Settlement. I mean, and this is all over this. So part of our environment is land, and we have to protect the little land that we have, unless we go for land reclamation that I don't want to open economic work safely.
Thank you, Dr. Quintana, and Steve or Sarah, or both.
You go first, Sarah.
I'd like to, I agree with Dr. Quintana, because even the construction of hotels, like we've seen many times, like the application for private beaches, taking away public land from the people. I think what should be done is implementation of policy instruments for environmental sustainable development. For example, maybe giving subsidies to hotels so they invest in eco-friendly procurement, and maybe even asking for a tax from tourists, like an extra charge every time they book. Obviously saying maybe that we want to invest in grey water facilities, like would you like to contribute? Maybe these little steps that could create a certain awareness of what's happening, basically.
Thank you.
I think back to the original question over what are Malta's natural resources and what can be done to protect them vis-a-vis the tourist industry. I mean, if you had to say Malta's only natural resource was stone, I'd say you've taken a narrowish definition of what's a resource, because after you've taken it, what can be extracted. I view it wider. So I see, okay, our resources are land, stone, but it's also the sea, it's the beach, it's what's available around us. And in that regard, there's a lot that can be done. So for example, if we had to take a more historical outlook, Malta's tourist industry at the very beginning, the main reason it was developed for was sun, sand, and sea. So that was the main marketing tool, and that was why we attracted people. Now it's much wider. But there, I think we have to be very careful with when we designate Natura 2000 sites, how we then manage them and how they can be linked to tourism. So if I had to take Maestral, it was designated as Malta's largest national park quite a few years ago. But only in the last few years have the management plans really been put into place, and we're actually seeing it transform into what is a lovely national park. So sometimes there's a bit of, we implement policy and then there's a delay until anything really gets rolling or gets off the ground. And that is something where we should work on, especially for facilitating greener forms of tourism or ecotourism, or at least introducing tourists to other areas of Malta instead of Slima St. Julian's Valletta.
I think, and this goes back to my next comment is linked to something that Dr. Quintano said earlier in discussion related to supply and demand. Although that is the generic rule, undoubtedly that is the generic rule, I still think that there is the possibility of carving out a niche market, of creating a demand, not on the scale to bring over, the amount of tourists needed to keep our tourism economy going. But one fantastic example, in my opinion, is the Baroque Music Festival. We're not known to produce dozens of Baroque musicians. We do have a very good orchestra. We've got, but the creation of this notion of a Baroque music festival in January, when tourism is relatively low, traditionally one of the leaner months, with a theme that is, okay, it's a Baroque city, but that is one success story that I think we can actually carve out a niche market, and we can use that as an example and see how we can create and carve out niche markets for aspects that Steve was mentioning. Things like, for example, as one thing that we have here in certain times of the year is beautiful light, okay? Especially when the northwesterly blows, the light for photography and filming is absolutely stunning. Yet hardly anyone, I think there used to be one person who markets small groups for photography tours, walking tours with photography in mind. And we're ideally placed because in the morning you can go and catch the sunrise at Marsaxlokk with the colors of the traditional boats. In the afternoon you can take them to Dingley, to the village and to the cliffs and so on. So there are niche markets out there which have yet to be developed.
Yes, I think that a comment for both Stephen and Sarah, I really agree with them. in terms that, in fact, the laws and regulations do exist. Thank goodness we have our own laws. We have our European Union laws, thank goodness, to fall back on. The problem in this country, of course, is one: it's enforcement. So it's useless having laws and regulations if they're not enforced. It's as simple as that. And yes, Professor being the niche marketing has actually it can never be enough, but we have used it because at the end of the day, although we talk about over tourism, etc., Malta has the best seasonality index of any resort in the Mediterranean. Actually, okay, there is a difference between peak summer, July, August, and January, February, but at least even in January, February, the industry does not hibernate. It doesn't go into hibernation as happens next door in Sicily, Greek islands, etc., etc. The reason for this is that obviously we've been very clever in diversifying into niche markets, which are not weather related, really and truly. In particular, what is known as the MUHS, the MUHS meetings, incentives, conference, and events, which is the backbone of the five-star industry. And also, I've always wondered, and this is again perhaps addressed to Professor Gumby, is that we never marketed ourselves as a winter sun destination. We tend to think of, or rather the market out there, the huge market out there, tend to label, to think of Tenerife, Las Palmas, Canary Islands, so on and so forth, Madeira, as being the typical traditional winter sun destination. I've been there in winter. Oh my goodness, if you think you can swim there in January, February, if you think the weather is nice in January, you must be joking. Our weather is far nicer, The sea is warmer and hotter than the summer sometimes. So this is, I think, a possible asset. Our winter sun, our winter sea, which we've never branded. We've never branded.
One of the things we're working on now, when I say we, it's the university and Heritage Malta, we as a nation actually. We were the first nation to set up a government a unit within an existing government agency. So the unit is the Underwater Cultural Heritage Unit, which is quite a mouthful, abbreviated to UCHU, which doesn't sound too good, but it is what it is. So what we've done is, and through the KSU, I'll share a couple of links, and then the KSU can share them with its members and beyond. What we've done is the parting philosophy is, why can't somebody visiting our islands or a member of the general public buy a ticket and visit the War Museum, and yet they cannot visit a wreck from World War II? So this unit was set up within Heritage Malta. We launched with 15 sites. It's gone up to 18, and 3 more sites are being launched in 2021. Unfortunately, the first summer was 2019. The second summer was this summer with in the middle of COVID madness. And why am I mentioning this? One, for a bit of self-publicity, I may as well shamelessly promote what we're up to once we're here. But secondly, and more importantly, and seriously, these are types of divers, because our wrecks are mainly beyond 55 meters. These are types of divers that don't like to visit in the peak months when scuba diving is actually at its peak. They like to come to Malta April, May, October, November. The water is actually clearer in those days. The boats, let's say that you need to go out, you need to rent a boat to go out, are more available, okay, and possibly better priced as well. And this is, I use the example of the Baroque Music Festival, but this is hopefully in 2-3 years' time, if a similar discussion is held and I'm invited back, I'll hopefully be able to say that this is another success story, because it's bringing people down for a niche market. You can dive an amphora wreck in Greece and then dive a wreck from World War I, but you've got to catch a ferry, you've got to drive a van for 10 hours, etc., etc. In Malta, within 3 years, you're going to be able to dive an amphora wreck today, and weather permitting, you can dive a World War I wreck tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, dive on a plane from World War II. Nowhere in the world, nowhere, and I can say this with my hand on my heart, nowhere in the world is there the diversity of underwater cultural heritage that we have here. There may be areas with comparable concentration, but not areas with the diversity. So, for example, in Truk Lagoon, besides all the difficulties of getting to Truk Lagoon, there are only wrecks from World War from World War II. So we beat them on diversity. We beat them on, I mentioned Truk Lagoon because it is a go-to place. We beat them on accessibility. It's much easier to get here from places like Germany. Very, very importantly, and I'll conclude on this point because we're also talking about the environment. So rather than tourism versus the environment, in this particular case of deep water diving, it's actually a question of tourism and the environment. Why? Because these deep water shipwrecks have ended up as ecological hotspots. What do I mean by this? I mean, you have to imagine the seabed as a desert, and then these shipwrecks like an oasis in the middle of the desert, full of coral, fish, full of marine life. Okay, so they are now important to protect, both as a cultural resource because they're part of our memory, etc. Part of our tourism product because they're contributing to the economy, and also as this natural resource because they're contributing to the regeneration of marine life and so on. So on this, I'd like to end my comments on this positive note, and I will share the links.
Thank you, Professor Gambin. Before we conclude, I would like to thank the Tourism Studies Association, the Earth Systems Association, and the Malta University Historical Society, who collaborated with us to put up this discussion, this on-topic discussion. I thank you all for contributing, and to those watching. Do you guys have any concluding remarks?
My concluding remark is that actually, at the moment, looking forward, everybody's asking what is this post-COVID world going to be like. Many are advocating that it's going to be a slow recovery, that it's going to take 3, 4, or 5 years to come back to the world we used to know up to last December. And I think that this is unfortunately all rubbish. Basically, there is so much pent-up demand, as we call it in economics, that there's going to be a boom in practically every single sector, including tourism. If we spoke about over-tourism up to December, January, I published my book on over-tourism in January, which was very bad timing. It's still selling, but still, funny enough. So sometimes I wonder who wanted to buy it. But still, lessons learned from the past on over-tourism, etc., etc. We better heed them, because I think there's going to be so much pent-up demand that I can't wait to get out of here and out of lockdown and travel. I think I'll buy 10 air tickets the moment that the bans are lifted, actually. So, and again, we're going to forget everything. We're going to forget the environment. We're going to forget the ecology. We're going to go back to our old ways, simply because, again, the industry, the supply side, do you blame them? They're going to have to make up for the losses made during this year. So again, I know I'm preaching to the converted, but I'm afraid that could be very much a reality.
I'm not nodding my head because I agree with the outcome. I'm nodding my head because I agree with your pronostico, with what you're predicting. I too am one of those that thinks that there's this pent up desire to travel, to rest, to relax and so on. And I too am sort of slightly worried at the impact, but also aware of the realities. But I'm a glass half full type of person, and I don't think that or else I hope that not all the lessons will go unnoticed. Okay, I probably they will, but at least if we save a small percentage of the lessons, then we would have saved something. Now, and the other positive thing is, look, we've got 2 young people on this panel. We've got a number of people attending. So there are initiatives, and it is in the national psyche, you know, we are aware of these things. So let's try and build on such small initiatives, and hopefully look forward to a better and more positive future.
Thank you. Steve or Sarah, do you have any concluding remarks before we sign off?
I'd basically say just awareness. Awareness is key. I think that even people my age need to be aware of their impact, because sometimes it goes unnoticed, and it's really, really important, because a sustainable future, it needs to happen. It cannot be if, because it's the way forward. We can't just forget about it.
Thank you.
I echo what Sarah rightly said. Whether we choose to or not, we will have to go sustainable. And I do hope that this crisis has shown, at its most basic, the biggest difference from an environmental standpoint has been air pollution fell. And I suspect that there is going to be a lot of political pressure to keep air pollution down, irrespective of what's happening in other sectors. I do hope that then kind of transcends and feeds into other activities we do and other activities we do that will hopefully, in a few years' time, we can say our environmental impact has reduced to a more sustainable. But it's a long road. So we just have to keep working on it.
Thank you, Steve. On that note, I would like to thank all of the panelists present today, and to those watching today and whenever. This discussion will be available on our Facebook page shortly. Again, I thank you all and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.